director's trademark. Director and several of his friends get raped over the course of the movie.
I gotta say, I mean, I did make note of just how many times they used the joke about that weird cowboy soliciting gay sex for money.
Who is that? Is that a Daily Wire guy?
I don't know. But like they went to that well no less than a half dozen times in this movie. And I mean, like, yeah, it sure is a funny joke to think about having sex with a trans woman who you're paying for sex. That's a joke that they did in this movie at least a half a dozen times. Okay. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. It's Thursday, December 21st. It is your last Chapo for the calendar year. And we've got a doozy of one for you today. It's a movie episode. Joining us, of course, is the great Bryan Quinby. We're back again. And fellas, I got to say, doing this episode about the Daily Wire movie Lady Ballers was my idea. And it's one that I pretty much instantly regretted because within 30 seconds of watching this movie, I realized that I was in for something. It was going to be a real slog to get through. I mean, this movie, when I started, I was like, look, it's a comedy. It'll be a tight 90, get in, get out. I can watch it in like 20-minute chunks as I do chores around the house. Nope, this movie was pretty much 2 hours long.
That was what hit me.
Yeah, this movie is like, I don't know people who have played the game Control out there. This was like an object of power from that game. This movie is like a quantum object. Like it somehow became longer the more I watched it. Like the counter increased the further it went. I felt like I was watching it for 9 hours. I kept trying to do things like watch combat footage or play Ready or Not to like clear my mind, but it just kept fucking going. This I very early in the movie, I was trying to think of like the secondhand embarrassment I was getting, and I realized it reminded me of something from my own life when I was 6. And I would I would write down my ideas for like, you know, a movie. And it was just like a pastiche of things I'd seen from like an Adam Sandler movie and then 3 Disney movies. So I would like hand a sheet of paper to my mom that was like, it's a coach acting stupid. And then like a dog eats a cake and then scores a touchdown. But that's like how they made this. It's just a horrible combination of like literally that things they saw in an Adam Sandler movie, then like things they saw in like a college humor sketch. There's a lot. Felix. There's a lot of like a man with mahogany books like that in that station.
Yeah.
Like
no, Felix, you're exactly right that Jeremy Boring and company, who is the writer, director, and star of this movie, and it was like a good indication of where it was going, that in the credits it's like a film by Jeremy Boring, a boring picture, a production of boring films, because it really like it front loaded the experience. But you're right, like what they were trying to go for was that like 90s era of like SNL comedies, like, you know, Dirty Work or Billy Madison or you know, like early 2000s like Anchorman, Judd Apatow. Like they're trying to go for that broad, silly, kind of dirty 90s comedy. But here's the thing, even with a staunchly right-wing point of view, the soy has become so hegemonic in our culture that did you notice that every quote unquote joke in this movie had nothing to do with the character situation or like advancement of the plot? It was just an ironic aside, basically essentially made to the audience, where Jeremy Boring goes, "That was weird, wasn't it? A girl with a dick? Now I've heard everything." Like,
yeah,
it was so unbelievably soy, this movie.
It's 85% too political. Like they were really trying to make like Sorority Boys or whatever that movie was, but they just, every joke is just like, can you believe this is what the left thinks? And it's like, oh, like yeah, that's how they fucked it up.
Like, I think we were discussing before we got on mic, like what is the worst movie we've ever done for this show in the series of like right wingers trying to make movies, and I don't think I don't think this one tops the Range 15 movie, the one rare movie episode I actually wasn't involved in. But I will say that this is far and away the least funny movie we've ever had to do.
Yeah,
for a movie that's trying to be a comedy, a raucous, satirical work of comedy. I have never seen anything less funny than this movie. And it wasn't even like kind of like cringe humor where you're like, oh God, it like hurts you to like, which is in itself kind of funny. This was just like anti-comedy on the level that negates the very existence of laughter.
Yeah, the worst part of it was that you could always see the form of the thing they were going for, which was, like a thing that you've seen 15 years ago. Like, in fact, there were several touches in this movie that suggest Jeremy Boring was like a failed, like, shoegaze director at one point.
He was!
Yeah,
he was!
Yeah, he was like a guy who tried to get in on like the indie sleaze movement and like it just never happened for him. And like, look, it didn't happen for me either. I didn't have sex in 2009 either. But like, you don't see me making this. I mean, the thing at the end where Matt Walsh is like, another
oh my God.
another thing I've done is Matt Walsh, and Candace Owens is like, you didn't do anything, and he goes,
complete ripoff of The Simpsons,
which is literally a meme from like 2015 of like, my work is done here. You didn't do anything, which is based off a Simpsons joke from fucking 15 years before that.
It's so 1991.
I didn't know that he was the CEO of the Daily Wire. I thought he was just like a guy that I thought like a lot of the people in this movie. It's like when you go to the comic book movies, when you go see like a Marvel movie and you're there with a bunch of Marvel fans and you're just a person that's like, I'm just, trying to fill my head for 2 hours. And like some guy comes on screen and people start clapping and cheering and you don't know who that guy is because you don't read the comics. That I felt that way through this whole movie. Only the comics was the Daily Wire universe.
Unfortunately, Brian, I do know the contributors to the Daily Wire as well as I know, the uncanny, astonishing, and incredible X-Men and their various lineups. So that when Andrew Klavan gets a one-sentence cameo to go, I've never seen a woman with a dick that big, I was like, yes, that's the Easter egg for all the Andy Klavan fans out there. And I just want to say that, like, while this has the veneer of a 90s Adam Sandler comedy, but with incredibly soy writing, imagine like a 90s SNL comedy where virtually every joke is infused with the threat of being forcibly sodomized. And like that is the people who created this movie. Yeah. And here's the thing, like, here's the main thing, my main takeaway from this movie is that going into it, I expected a hateful piece of shit that just like was a carnival of denigration of gay and trans people. And this movie was certainly that. I mean, I don't want to undersell that part of this movie, but I was astonished that the actual real target of the most hateful quote unquote comedy in this movie, or like the butt of virtually every joke that's mean in this movie, is not gay or trans people. It is cisgendered heterosexual women. Yes. This is not a movie that is a outrageous critique of the idea that trans athletes should be allowed to compete in the in competition that aligns with their gender identity. The movie certainly is that, but what this movie actually is not a critique, but an argument against the concept of women's sports writ large. This movie is an attack on the idea that women are in any way equal to men across the board, leaving basketball aside.
A couple of things, like he does say, like, women are good at other things, like loving their children and just stuff that, like, everybody
oh my God.
does.
Yeah, no. Yeah, they have that late in the movie, which is, that's my least favorite thing, is when these guys have to do, like, a big speech about, like, how much they love women. And it's always so, like, it's so... there's literally a Demonius X video called What is a Friend that it sounds exactly like. And he's, if I can recall this video from many years ago, he says, a woman is a friend who can do some cool shit like a guy can and maybe suck your sausage. But she can't fuck around like you can with the boys. But she can be good at other things like emotions and shit. And that's it. Basically, it was Jeremy Boring's entire speech. It was like a guy who like experiences no sexual attraction, making the case for women.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Okay, well, here's the other thing about Jeremy Boring. If I knew nothing about this movie going into it and just watched the first 5 to 10 minutes, I would have assumed that this was a comedy about a gay basketball coach and his all-white basketball team.
I wanted to say the same thing. First of all, I at first was like, nobody in this movie looks like they should be in this movie for some, like I had this weird feeling where like at the beginning, I was like, this guy, I had the same exact reaction that you did. I will say this.
It's a gay basketball coach coaching an all-white high school basketball team to the state championship of Tennessee in 2008 is how this movie begins. And I should mention that like in some of the press for this movie, the Daily Wire released a clip of Ben Shapiro talking to Jeremy Boring about this movie. And in it, he reveals that originally they wanted to do this movie about a team of men's basketball, like a former high school men's basketball players who put on wigs to compete against women because sports are woke now. Ben Shapiro said they originally wanted to do this concept as a documentary, but dropped it when they realized that the thing they portray in this movie simply doesn't happen nor would be allowed to happen anywhere in the United States. Yeah. So like, I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to say this movie is hateful to trans people because this movie does not even understand trans people nor feature a single trans person in it. This is like, they have a fundamental disconnect between like the sequence in the movie where he gets a job at a restaurant in Nashville that just features men dressed as women. Like, I don't think the movie they seem to confuse transvestitism with transgenderism. And like, but like, here's the thing. Despite the fact that like the essential comedic plot of this movie, the thing it is satirizing does not exist. So therefore, like, there's nothing to satirize. The scenario that this movie mines comic material from doesn't exist. Like, there's nothing to mine there. But here's another, like, the broader part about the broader misogyny of this movie, not just like its hatred of gay and trans people, which I said are like a complete afterthought in the plot of this movie. They essentially don't exist at all in the universe of this movie. But like, aside from the ludicrous idea that like the plot of this movie could be allowed to happen because of wokeness in sports, there's another huge glaring like and deeply misogynistic belief that this movie expects you, the audience, to fucking go along with wholeheartedly. And that is the idea that a team of former high school athletes who have not trained or played the sport in over a decade could easily wash off the court a professional women's basketball team.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm sorry. Just because they like, I know they can't dunk, but the New York Liberty would fucking still smoke that men's team by 60 points.
Yeah. Like, even with like a more like I don't know, a less abstract sport, a less abstract form of competition, there are countless videos of like women's MMA fighters that regularly fight in the 115 and like 135 pound divisions, like beating the shit out of men, and like men who have trained, men who are considerably larger than them. Obviously, that doesn't mean that like a 135 pound woman could like beat John Jones, but like professional athlete does like mean something.
Yeah, and like this movie is so clearly done, like Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro in the Daily Wire. This movie just comports to every stereotype I had in my head about them going into this movie, is that they were all dweebs in high school who were abused by people who were good at sports and thought that that was right and proper. And then their adult life have sort of appropriated the title of winner or jock from it because they continue to be mean to those weaker than them. And the thing is, like, the sexism of this movie and its hatred towards all women's sports stems from the fact that a guy like Ben Shapiro, who has been basically slighted by his male peers his entire life, has been shorter, smaller, and weaker than every man around him, and certainly less gifted at athletic competition, has to rely so heavily on the idea that he's still better than any woman on the planet, any physical act. And it's just like, that is plainly untrue. Plainly.
Yeah. All right. So can we talk about like the shittiness of how this was made? Because like, okay, they do this like very like brain damage college humor thing of like when the, let's say, flamboyant straight coach is winning. They show that, and they win the championships. They're on top of the world, and then they just cut to like it's 10 years later, and his life is shit. There isn't like a smash cut. There isn't like a fade. There isn't any type of like funny transition that like any competent director would use to suggest like the passage of time and like the collapse of this guy's life. It's just he's a very long scene of him now in a high school, and he unfortunately has, let's just say, a lot of hip hop style students. Like he's it's like you see him, his hair is gray now, and he's like doing the same shit he was doing in the start of the movie, where he's like
places, everybody, remember to use the bounce path every once in a while.
yeah, he's like, winning is the most important thing, and all his students are like, yo, dog, can we finish this up? I got a rape later. Yo, you boring as hell. I'm finna vote for a progressive prosecutor so I can get back on the streets in 6 months.
I mean, it sounds...
I got gang practice later.
It does sound like Felix is... like you, it's almost not like a exaggeration. They just are like, this guy goes, don't steal my catalytic converter. Then they steal his catalytic converter, and he gets fired for saying, don't steal my catalytic converter because it's racist. And it's like, that is as racist of a joke as you could possibly open the movie.
You know what's also pretty racist in this movie? The idea that his success as a coach of high school basketball decreased dramatically after any black students were allowed into the school district he was a coach of.
Yeah. It's just like, also, okay, I was following the catalytic converter story. The guy stealing the catalytic converter, look, they all had the Edgar haircut. I don't think it says anything about the Latinx people, but none of those guys were black guys. I'm sorry. They were all like Latino guys, like Mexican guys in Texas, because they all had the Edgar. Like, I was obsessed with that story for the longest time. That was not like a thing that like tons of black guys were doing. But, I forgot. In the first 10 minutes of the movie, I think that they have issued like a direct challenge, like, to me, because there's a character in the movie, like, who's on their team, who's like implied to be, he's like a semi-gay obsessive who loves the team, and they hate him, and they named him Felix, and it's like,
yep.
I'm the only guy like named that. It's like it's not 1965 anymore. There aren't tons of guys with that name.
Just you and the cat at this point.
Yeah, they're issuing like a direct shot across the bow at me, and they're challenging me to, I don't know, a contest where we both get raped by the how much guy from the movie.
You gotta, they want you to make your own fucking movie that's woke instead of I do want to say also, just real, it is so great that the hero of this movie is an extremely divorced guy.
Yep.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They can't help it. They can't help it. Like, oh God, he's the most divorced guy in the world. And his wife is currently shacked up with a character played by Matt Walsh, who we find out, this is mind-boggling to me. Matt Walsh, like, it's like, okay, his character is your ex-wife's current boyfriend. And like, he's got a ridiculous wig, and he's doing like meditation and being like, always wants to hug. And it's like, it's the same joke every time he's on screen. It's just like, he's a guy who wants to hug you and be touchy-feely and like a, sort of like Eastern spirituality liberal or whatever. We then find out at the end of the movie that the wife's boyfriend character was just Matt Walsh in a wig, who says, my work here is done, which means his work is insinuating himself into the lives and families of losers, having sex with their wives to inspire them to be winners.
I I do want to say also when he picks his daughter up from school and he pulls up and the teacher has 4 masks on with different like languages on them or with different trans. It was so like, oh my God, they're just gonna, because what happens after that is they go to his ex-wife's house and in her yard, she has a sign that says, "In this house, we believe crickets are delicious. Silence is violence. Speech is also violence. No one is illegal, but Europeans coming to America was bad. Guns don't kill people. White people kill people. Also, guns kill people. Trans rights are human rights. Feelings don't care about your facts.
Oh,
Pride Month is every month. Social credit scores matter. In exclusive and inclusion. And finally, the earth is literally going to burst into flame one day." And I was like, that's not a joke. That is like, that's what they think the left believes. That's like exactly the words that they would use to describe kind of the crickets thing is the one that was really a giveaway.
That drove me insane how every fucking scene they had to touch on like 15 things that they're mad about all the time. And like they can't just focus on like one or two like shitty systems of jokes. At all times, they're like on like a verbal twister mat of like, okay, we have to take on the trans thing, then like the Hunter Biden laptop for some reason, then Impossible Burgers.
You got to remember also the line when his daughter's telling him what she did at school that day. And she said, "We learned about the Cold War. We had a moment of silence for the workers."
Yeah. Oh my God. That's how the entire movie basically kicks into motion, is that he picks his daughter up from school and like the mask lady is like bitching at him because he doesn't have a catalytic converter.
And he's
like,
late.
No, I'm a constant victim of black crime, blah, blah, blah. And he like gets her to take her masks off and he's like, "You're pretty. You should wear more concealer though." Which brings up even more questions about his character. But then there's just like, there's this repulsive scene where I realize the funniest thing to conservatives is like when like a little girl is like, "Joe Biden's a fucking idiot," you know, like when a little girl's like epic.
Yeah,
the scene is
sides.
just like
I will say
so
libs do the same. Sorry, I say libs do the same thing, Felix. They think it's epic when a kid says the Mango Mussolini is a bad guy.
Yeah, I guess it's just all like losers in America. Like,
yeah. The common denominator among losers everywhere is needing a literal child to give voice to the things that you're not confident enough to voice yourself. But I will say this, for the actor who portrays Jeremy Boring's daughter in this movie is by far the best actor in this entire movie. By far the best actor. And like what I think is so funny about like using kids to give voice to epic statements that you'd be embarrassed to say, and they're like, "Oh, from the mouth of babes." I like that in the sort of anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-grooming movie, they cast this like, angelic 8-year-old girl to play the daughter. And then like every line that she has in this movie is talking about how a girl showed her penis. And they're like, "Okay, great job. Can we just do another take? Let's take it from you saying penis one more time."
Yeah, it's the same thing they do where they're for some reason constantly bringing up hypotheticals where like a 12-year-old gets raped and has to give birth, and they're like, "Well, now she's a mother and she's happy now." And it's like, wait, what? Like, why are you bringing this up? Like, but it's like the same thing where I have a theory. There's a project that we're working on now that addresses this theory that basically the conservative media self-reproduced at too rapid a rate and basically caused them to become like the lowest form of like internet poster, which is just like a guy who posts CP on forums. That's basically like what they are now. Like they're just broadcasting like snuff films and CP constantly. either verbally
And they're
or
like,
not.
see, look how evil this is. Look at it.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of that in this movie. Just like the very lurid idea of that.
I just want to say that the little girl character is interesting because they do try to put a lot of like, oh, she's being indoctrinated into gender at school into her mouth that's supposed to be satirical or whatever. And there's a big scene a little
pretty
later.
Good job explaining all of it.
Yes, I was just going to bring up. There's a scene later where they have her explain how like gender works to all the dunce basketball players, and she's just very calmly laying out. It's like some people have identities that are not their assigned gender at birth, and then they convert to different, and sexuality and gender are different, and sometimes you can switch between genders, and that's called gender fluidity, and it's supposed to be like this aha moment of like, look at the indoctrination, but it really comes off of as like, yes, this is also simple. A child can easily grasp it and have it make perfect sense.
Yeah, compared to like, I guess, men who presented with the idea that like, hey, I guess like according to this universe, you have to be trans every day at this restaurant to work here. And they're like, okay. And it's like, wait, is that what you like? Faced with that choice, would you do that?
That's what I mean. They fundamentally don't get or don't care about, and like they just don't understand. Like that's what I mean. Like I know this movie is intended to be offensive to people like me or people who haven't bought into the Daily Wire ethos and view of the world. But like there were so many instances in this movie where I could tell that they were trying to be cheeky and offensive, but like I literally didn't know what I was supposed to be offended about because their essential understanding of the world is so convoluted that like and just nonsensical. And the perfect example of this is the dollhouse restaurant that exists in this movie, where Jeremy Boring has lost his job as a high school basketball coach and he's a divorced loser. Everyone thinks he's a loser, so he goes to ask for his old job back. But that was like 20 years ago, and it's been converted into a restaurant called the Dollhouse, which just is like I don't even know how to describe it. It's just men with beards wearing wigs and dresses waiting on your table at a restaurant. And then
it's a drag.
Yeah, it's a drag
like
restaurant.
It's a drag bar. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a drag bar, but every single waiter is like a heterosexual guy who's like, can't wait to knock off at 5 and take this wig off. But then the work is over and they're still dressed like women. It makes no fucking sense.
Yeah. Like basically the plot of the movie goes into full gear basically because so his former like star basketball player works at this restaurant with him where they both like I guess like according to them they are like trans women either permanently or just like during the workday.
Just during the workday, yeah.
I know.
And like so he found out that like there's a local race in town where you can win $5,000.
Yes,
you're really good.
That's a tight ass race.
This is.
I'd try to learn to run at that point.
Can I just say that is such like a 6-year-old writing a movie. There's a race where you can win $5,000.
But only if you have a
talking
wig.
About. You fucking moron.
It's also very important that like it's open tryouts for something called the Global Games, which is like invented for this movie. And then in the universe of the movie, for the first time ever, America has opened up tryouts to represent America in the Global Games to just anyone. And there were like, and then there's like these little like news bullet, these little like Paul Verhoeven style, like, like local news clips where they're like, just saying the thing, just not even making a joke, just be like, for the first time ever, America will open up competition to losers and crippleds and lames rather than the usual standard of excellence that we've upheld in this country for 200 years.
Yeah.
That was like the biggest thing to me was like these people act like all comedy is too woke and too left and like everything they do is just political. But then these guys do this fucking movie where every line is dripping with just the text of what they believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so thuddingly literal. Like there is. It literally reminds me of like this, like the videos that Israel makes, where like Santa Claus gets a letter from like a child who's been kidnapped by Hamas and is like, oh no.
Such
Like
a good video.
it's the same.
Like, what is Santa going to do about it? Give him presents?
I love that video because Santa is like ostensibly thinking someone should do something about this. Like, but it's the same type of thing where it's like stunningly literal. Like there's no capability for abstract thought. So every character that's bad will say things like, I'm a journalist, so I'm a piece of shit.
Yes.
And like it's like literally that line is sprinkled throughout the movie, but it's like the way they talk about these movies that are just like judged on an objective scale, like the least funny shit you've ever seen. I don't think that it's impossible for conservatives to be funny, but like,
no,
it's impossible for anyone who views politics in this degree, where it's the same thing. They talk about this movie the same way. They remind me of the people who like reviewed Crazy Rich Asians and were like, I cried in the fucking theater because I couldn't believe that there was a movie where people in Singapore were rich. It's the same thing where they're talking about how fucking important it is. Like Matt Walsh has this humiliating tweet where he's like, "Lady ballers is so important because it shows we can use their weapon mockery again."
No, they can't.
No, it's like
the fact that they can
no capability of that.
It is true. Humor is a very effective weapon in political discourse. I mean, case in point, the success of this show. But the thing is, like, the way they view it first and foremost as a weapon, they're like, how do I just pull this trigger? It's like, no, you have to be funny first. And they just don't. And here's the thing. As offensive as the concept of this movie is, it is totally conceivable that you could do a funny movie about this concept, even from a right-wing perspective. And I kept waiting for, like for instance, script doctor Will Menaker in here. I kept waiting for. I would really like this movie if there was like the rich kids from the bougie part of town. Like they have a squad of like the rich trans kids basketball team, and they're snooty, and it's just like, it's like Meatballs or something, or Police Academy, like,
Yeah.
I also want to say that when our guy wins the race, he does get a Bud Light sponsorship, and somebody's like, they'll give anybody one of those.
Right, but so the reason that he gets to run the race as a woman because he's constantly wearing his like wig and like fake tits from work, like everywhere, which
work.
is like
I love it.
Like what the fuck? Like I don't. It might have been explained at some point, but I really don't feel like it was. He's just constantly wearing this shit. Again, this thing that is supposed to represent, like, in general, this movie represents a very grim vision for men. Basically that, like, your wife will be stolen by, like, a gay man for some reason, and you will be forced to be trans at your job. And then the job that you're trans at, you're just going to, like, forget to stop being trans when you clock out. So, like, he goes to, like, sign him up for the race because, like, he was like, hey, you're still really fast like you were in basketball. Basketball and track, those are two.
Two very comparable
they go
sports.
together.
Yeah, they're
like that, And
they're often testing how fast you run a 40 to be a basketball player.
Yeah. So that like Jeremy Boring is like, listen, miss, you're gonna get my good boy in, and the woman who's accepting signups like tases him because he's a white male. Mm-hmm. And then Alex, the guy who's wearing a wig, is like, hey, what's going on here? And the woman who tased him is like, oh my God, you're a trans athlete? You're stunning and brave. I have to go eat bugs and kill my kids with the vaccine. And so they sign him up in the women's race for $5,000. I
will say, to give this movie a half ounce of credit, Boring does a pretty decent pratfall where he smacks his head on the table after getting tased.
Yeah.
and it's just like the contempt this movie has for women, because like in every single sporting event that portrays these fucking middle-aged losers stepping onto a fucking track for the first time in decades, beating every one of the women competitors by like 50 yards.
Yeah.
Like by 5 seconds crossing the finish line. It's just like, okay, can we talk about the two characters on the basketball team that are brothers who are conceived by separate sperm in the same uterus, in the same egg?
I was so confused by what those guys were supposed to be. I guess I thought they were supposed to be scumbags at the
They
beginning.
were like the
and that
horny
was like,
characters. This like
Yeah.
they existed like this is the Daily Wire's conception. The two brother characters who again, very early in the movie, it's like, oh, these guys are brothers. And then Jeremy Boring has some line about how what is it? Your mother is not a catch. She was decidedly unfaithful to your dad's. And I was like, what? And then later in the movie, it's revealed that they were conceived by like separate sperm in like they're twins in utero conceived by two different guys' sperm.
That's not how it fucking would like.
Could
That
happen,
is
though.
like how a fucking like Greek philosopher would explain.
It's
twins.
the Aristotle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Writing the
And
story
that's why
where
we
A
have to kill-
homunculi comes out of your penis and then
Yeah,
falls
then
into
we
a
have to
woman's
kill
stomach.
every woman who has twins because that means she got two different sperm from different.
Your mom
guys.
your mom had sex when she was pregnant and it made another kid inside her.
It's so fucking stupid. They love this thing of like, well, you like, oh yeah, well, you guys are saying all this unscientific shit. You sound like a peasant from the Middle Ages. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're against no fault divorce, and you think that twins are caused by like orgies.
I do also want to say that when they do meet up with those guys, Alex is with them and he's carrying a bag. And in 2020, almost 2024, they say, "Is that a purse?" And he's like, "No, it's a merce." And it was
Oh
like
my
that.
God,
I
Brian.
couldn't even believe
Oh my
it.
God, the
It was in there.
mileage that
God.
Man Purse got. They wore out the treads on that joke, trying to fucking get a laugh out of that one in 2024, practically.
I just can't believe it. I mean, I guess these guys carry around briefcases instead or whatever. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, it was. That would be like if I saw that in a movie from like 2006, I would be like, "Shut the fuck up!" Like who, who? No one's doing that. But it's so like I feel like at least a quarter of this movie was written during Jeremy Boring, like his pre-unwoke period when he was trying to be like an indie sleaze director. He wants to be Noah Baumbach.
Yes.
That's his like foundational trauma. He wants to be Noah Baumbach, and he like probably tried to write a movie where like he's divorced, but he's like he's like the best politics guy, and his wife like he wrote like a racist version of Marriage Story probably.
Okay.
Where his wife is like, I'm dating this guy Jamarcus who's a murderer. And they were like, Jeremy, this is horrible. This is what your wife is dating a black 17-year-old who's killed 20 people and is going to Harvard on an affirmative action scholarship. that doesn't exist. And he's like, good. Fuck you! I'm all right. I'm fully in on the movement now.
Well, I mean, you bring up. I mean, here. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but like, there are several jokes in this movie that are all at the expense of people who, at one point in their life, had aspirations to pursue a creative field like the film industry, either as an actor, a writer, or a director. And at every point, they are like brutally shut down for what a stupid decision it was and how dumb and untalented they are for ever trying to be an actor or like in movies or whatever. And I just can't help but think that like this is Jeremy Boring can't help but betray himself here. I mean, you mentioned his career as an indie sleaze, a mumblecore director. He originally he founded a production company with his two actual Hollywood friends who are actually like successful actors, and that's Joel David Moore, who's in the Avatar movies, and Zachary Levi, who's Shazam. And I guess they're like holding down the Christian contingent in Hollywood. But their company went nowhere. I don't think it even produced a single movie. And this is Jeremy Boring's company he founded with his two successful friends. Take a guess what it was called. Coattails Entertainment.
Perfect.
Oh God.
Okay.
I mean, he is the I feel like he is the ideal of the joke that like somebody like you guys or me could turn right wing in order to get more money. You know what I mean? Like he is definitely, now he comes off as like a guy who is like, well, I'm not going to be able to make real movies that play in the movie theater, so I'll just do this Daily Wire Plus gig, I guess.
Yeah, like I begrudgingly do have sympathy for him because it's like, look, I wish we had all made it in 2009. That was the best time ever. That was the greatest time in human history. But we didn't. You, Jeremy Boring, you presumably were like 49 then.
Yeah.
I was but a boy. But, regardless, we all carry scars from that. But like stop fucking making movies, please.
You're not good at it.
Or like try to make like your version of Garden State that you undoubtedly wrote the entire script for.
Try not to put a conservative hat on a hat on a hat on a hat in every joke, and I think you might be able to figure something out.
Yeah, he could make like a very 5 out of 10 mumblecore movie. If you did shock therapy every time he wants to like include a joke where a stupid liberal woman is like, oh, I'm doing a fucking land acknowledgement for Christmas or something.
I am reading his Wikipedia, and I find this like really interesting line here because I was very confused about it in the movie. In March 2022, Boring opened a line of subscription-based shaving razors called Jeremy's Razors.
Yep, there's an ad for them in this movie.
I know. I thought that was a joke on Harry's Razors, but I don't know. Like, is that or was it just an ad? I couldn't figure. I thought it was a joke.
They tried to be cheeky about it, but they put a podcast ad in the middle of their movie. And at that point, there's no coming back from that. That's like you're trying to make a joke of this, but you are the ones getting played.
Yeah.
As with everything, I think that like everything like this, I think the actual more interesting movie would be the meta movie about the failed Hollywood aspiration guy who has to slum it in this conservative media landscape, making this movie, probably getting an actual divorce while it's happening, texting his Hollywood big shot friend Zachary Levi, begging him to do a cameo in this thing, knowing that he's making schlock, but it's the best option that he can. That's the mumblecore movie Jeremy Boring should make.
Yeah, I think like any movie really about like anyone who's in the conservative movement, because it is such an interesting world, and it sucks that like there are so few good comedies out, because it's like it's a patently ridiculous and funny world just because there is so much money going around. There is such an unbelievable amount of money going around that like it everything else almost pales in comparison, and the result of that money is just like they literally have no idea what to do with it, and they are assigning entire bureaus to like the most fucked up people on earth, and it's funny to watch that.
It's like watching an adult play bowling with the bumpers in, you know?
Yeah. Just to know, there is a podcast ad halfway through this movie that's intended to be funny and meta, like winking at the audience.
My man, looking smooth.
Man, you guys weren't kidding. These Jeremy's razors are amazing.
And did you know that Jeremy's now offers a razor specially designed for women?
And don't forget about Jeremy's shampoo
and conditioner. They keep our hair silky and smooth.
Couldn't we just find someone else, like from the year before?
But like betraying the fact, like in every aspect of the production of this movie, they did not intend for it to be seen by anyone who was not a Daily Wire subscriber, because this joke would make no fucking sense if you were seeing this movie in a theater and didn't know that Jeremy Boring was a shaving impresario. In addition to the razors that he sells, he also tried to sell a line of anti-woke chocolate bars. After the
I remember those.
Yeah, no, it says, in March, seeking to capitalize on right-wing outrage over Hershey's chocolate, including a trans woman in their PR campaign for International Women's Day, Boring unveiled Jeremy's chocolates. The first 2 milk chocolate bars available were he, him, and she, her. The former made with nuts and the latter nutless. Haha. The Daily Wire claimed they sold 500,000 bars within days of launch. The bars cost $30 for a pack of 4 chocolate bars. So that's $7 a chocolate bar. And it says here, who did receive their pricey candy, the bars cost as much as $7 a piece before taxes and fees, found the wait wasn't necessarily worth it. Incomplete orders, melted chocolate, and overall dissatisfaction with quality were common in customer reviews. Of course, many Daily Wire's loyal subscribers still tried to find a positive spin, and some were satisfied to make a political statement with their spending, arguing that, quote, taste was never the point.
Oh, God.
But that sums it up. It's like, okay, Hershey's used a trans woman in their ad for International Women's Day, and he got so mad about that he just had to sell people $8 candy bars to remind them that we're the hateful candy. Please eat that at $8 a pop.
Do you know anyone who you would at least like to talk to who like knows all the ad campaigns that are going on? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the fucking Hershey's think he's talking about is. Like, I guess they did like some fucking photo shoot where they're like, here's the fucking woman who built did chemistry.
Yeah,
Here's a trans woman, and he's like, what the fuck? There used to be real women in these fucking Hershey's ads. If my friend tried to text me about that, I would swat him. I would be like, "Shut the fuck up!"
Yeah. As a human being in 2024, 2023, and not let's say not someone who's just been liberated by the Allied forces in Holland or something. I don't give a shit about Hershey bars, nor have I thought about them even once in the last 30 years.
I can't believe he didn't make a beer called Crud Light or something like that.
See, that would be funny.
Like $200.
That'd be too much of a joke in there. Crud Light is just a funny phrase, but just congenitally incapable, because it goes back to the same thing we said over and over on this show. They're too mad to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can tell, you can feel it.
And
in the movie.
a good example of that is we got to talk about the evil bitch liberal journalist character.
But you just did that entire story to what?
To make a name for myself? To get clicks? To gain power? What part of I'm a journalist do you not understand?
Who Jeremy Boring's character engages in some sort of S&M relationship with. Like, once again, what the Daily Wire writers and staff think that like normal, cool, heterosexual, horny American guys are like is deeply strange. Because we can talk about the weird separate sperm twins, and that's a joke, and that's something that's mentioned at least 4 times in this movie. But when they in the present day, when they go to pick them up and be like, hey, you got to play for our team again, they're running a car dealership in which they sort of pull back a curtain to reveal their like bro bedroom where the magic happens, and it's very clear that it's just like a cave where they do swim in together. And they're like, wait, this is where the magic happens? Or like with you in the same room? And they're like, yeah, dude. And it's just like, it's just one of these things where it's like, it just doesn't add up. Like, I don't get
there's so much going on with the two brothers characters where like, so they're wearing like, I guess if like you were doing a skit making fun of rappers in 1984, this is what they would dress like, because they're wearing like gold tracksuits.
Yeah,
and that's part of the joke. But then they have a car dealership where they'll give you a ride to the airport.
Yeah,
and then they're also bail bondsmen. But then the meat of this is. Yeah, they're just constantly running a 2-man train on girls. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, can you pick like this is like 18 things? Like, what is the focus of this?
I think this is them trying to do a joke about a hustler. Like you would in another movie, you would see somebody, but it's like they usually are better at kind of. They could show them doing one thing and then doing the next thing. But instead, they just had them stand and look at the camera and say, we drive people to the airport. We have a sex room at our car dealership. We love to play
basketball. Yeah.
Here's another example of like I said, like for this movie to like pull off a joke, there are things that you have to like assumptions that you have to have innately already to even understand what they're trying to make fun of, or even like be cognizant that there's humor to be mined, or like you're supposed to laugh at something, right? And it speaks to like the fundamentally perverted sexuality of the people making this movie. The scene where they go to find the center, the big man on the team, and he's living in the Michigan woods as like a survivalist because 10 years prior he went insane and lost like a college basketball championship at, whatever, like he lost a big basketball game. And then in the movie it's revealed he went insane because the opposing team's mascot was doing sort of hip thrusts at him. And that caused a psychic break in him that like 10 years later, he has kidnapped this mascot and keeps him in a basement in his like forest cabin to torture him.
That was crazy. That was actually like an insane twist. I thought, because it like for a second, I'm like, I feel bad for the Badger now, man. He's like, they're saying he's been there for 10 years in the basement being tortured. And then I'm supposed to like the guy that's doing the torture. Also, no idea why they keep calling the guy fat.
Yes,
no
they kept saying you're fat.
Idea.
You've gained weight, and he's just very clearly not fat. And I kept wondering, like, is that the joke? Calling a guy who's obviously not fat multiple times. I was like, is this another bit of like meta ironic humor? But once again, it's he experiences a psychic break because he sees a mascot thrusting their hips in like the fucking gesture. And then like, but like I said, this is what I mean behind every joke in this movie is like the implied threat of rape and torture.
Yeah.
Like, it's like what, like the idea that like that would cause a psychic break is, I guess, kind of funny. But then the fact that he's been torturing this guy for years, like, very strange.
I do think that the you're fat thing is them having never really hung out with any dudes, but they're like, I hear when dudes hang out together, they make fun of each other a little bit.
Yes! Oh my God.
Yeah.
Because there's a scene in this movie where like the two horny brothers are like, we're lesbians now, and we're going to go to an all-girls sleepover. And Jeremy Boring's like, they don't actually just have sex with each other. And they're like, oh man, bro, what's going on?
Yeah. It is totally absent any background in like, male friendship.
No, yeah, but
there's just none of that.
The joke that they're aware of in the movie, that like straight guys think when girls have slumber parties, they're like getting naked and fucking each other. They have like, I mean, like that's that's a joke. Like it's been done a billion times in movies. It's not new or anything. But the real joke is that their vision of male friendship and camaraderie is as blinkered as the stupid idea that girls are just rubbing pussies together when they have a sleepover. They don't understand. They do not understand how men talk to each other. They don't understand like roasting or competition or camaraderie whatsoever. The only thing this movie knows and truly believes is that men and boys are better than women and girls in every aspect, in every way. Well, and that women, and not trans women, but that cisgendered women are disgusting and stupid.
Yeah. What about the journalist?
We need to talk about the journalist character. Because she's just like the closest thing this movie has to an antagonist. And this is another huge problem with this movie that's like screenwriting 101. There is no antagonist in this movie. There's no bad guy other than the culture writ large that allows people to switch their genders.
The journalist has a line where she like pins somebody up against a wall and pins Jeremy Boring up against the wall and says, I want you to put a baby in me. And then she's like, wait, never mind. I can't have another abortion again this year. And one of the guys from the team that's in the room is like, you're a monster. And then it just goes to the next scene.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not even a joke, really. That's just them.
That's just saying a woman who's got terminated a pregnancy is a monster.
Yeah. That's all it
That's
is.
the joke. And there's, in terms of like the best moment in this movie of just like, just zero subtext at all, a character looking at the screen and just repeating statistics, is when the female journalist character, Jeremy Boring's like, oh yeah, like my divorce has been pretty rough on my daughter. And then I swear to God, like the bitch journalist character just looks at the screen and is like, oh, you think so? You weren't aware that 70% of all people in prison were from divorced parents and divorced household? And then rattles off a dozen other statistics about something like 80% of suicides are from people who are whose parents got divorced. And I'm like, well, that can't possibly be fucking true. But also, just
all
like,
I could think about that during that moment is, bros, you have Steven Crowder in this movie. What are you like? Every character
is Steven Crowder in this movie?
I didn't even see.
I I thought he had like a one scene. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought he had like a one.
It was in the dollhouse. The dollhouse. Scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
one of the one line thing. But it's like these are the people you work with. Like every character in this movie is divorced. What is the model that you were trying to give here? Is this sincere? Are these statistics meant to be said as a joke? Like it's completely classic thing of being like, I need to stop a joke here to just rattle off my pure ideology.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I like the idea that Steven Crowder is like their Woody Allen. Or Roman Polanski.
Yeah.
Where they're like,
I respect his work, but not the man.
Yeah. They're like, look, he like kept his wife as a hostage for all those years, but he's, like no one is better at what he does. His craft is so good.
Listen, I have to say this about Steven Crowder. It was extremely hilarious when he stole Anthony Cumia's co-host away from him.
That was very funny.
So good, man.
That was
for weeks after he's talking. Anthony's like no co-host, and he's talking shit about Crowder and his old co-host. It was very worth it to see. I mean, that's one Steven Crowder plus on my side.
But then that co-host fell out with Crowder.
I know.
It's just like with that guy, I always get like tertiary economic anxiety for like people I don't know. I don't know why. But it just like for that guy, I feel it where it's like, oh, like what the fuck are you gonna do now, man? Like
Anthony's not going to trust you to be a permanent co-host ever again, and he's
not
got
getting invited back to the compound. That's for sure.
Yeah,
well, Anthony's dead now too.
Well, but all this backstabbing and bitching at each other. Like, do you think that like the misogynist attitudes in this movie that like is taken for granted, it all stems from the fact that like each one of these guys embodies all of the worst stereotypes about how women act?
Yeah.
I mean, they are. It has to be treacherous in the conservative. Well, I mean, and even I did, my show for years, and it can sometimes get treacherous in like on the left political stuff too. But these guys are all like, I mean, they're all stabbing each other in the back for another $100,000, which I mean, I guess if that's worth it for, because when they said Steven Crowder was going to pay Dave Landau more than Anthony did by like a lot, I was like started to try to figure out now what kind of money both of those guys have, because it sounds like Steven Crowder is doing very well for himself.
Can we talk about some of the like the Daily Wire cameo appearances in this movie that were just totally baffling? Like the Ted Cruz cameo. The Ted Cruz cameo. He gets a one line in this movie that's like, Ted Cruz is going in this movie. Ted Cruz is playing himself, and he's attending a high school basketball game in Tennessee. And he shows up and he's like, "Hey, are these seats taken?" And they're like, "Yes." And he's like, "I told you we should have gotten box seats." That's it. That's the joke.
Yeah, the Michael Knowles was like a one line thing because I recognized him, and the best one is Ben Shapiro in this rated R movie having cuss words bleeped.
Yep.
Because he probably wouldn't say them, I guess.
Okay, Ben Shapiro has a 5-second cameo as the referee in one of these basketball games. And I just, look, maybe this is a cheap shot, but I got to point out that he's still wearing his stupid-ass yarmulke, even in a cameo appearance portraying a basketball referee.
Like, I like the idea. I like the idea of like someone ejecting a referee for wearing a yarmulke.
It's not part of the uniform.
Get that off the fucking court. That's not part of basketball.
Would it surprise you to learn that Ben Shapiro is a huge Boston Celtics fan, even though he was born in Los Angeles?
No way.
I mean, well, look, if you're a fan of the NBA, you can do the math on that one. But like, I like all the montages. I love the montages of the lady ballers balling out against like, real women competition. Because like there's a scene of all them dunking, but it's so clear that it's a 6-foot hoop. It's a montage of them dunking on like a fucking 6-foot hoop. And then just like a slow-mo montage of just essentially women being beaten, but with basketballs instead of fists.
And one of the women falls in love with one of the loser guys too, like, and he gets her pregnant.
No, both of the brothers get her pregnant. It's the same thing that her dad did.
Yeah, that's what
their
it was.
mom
And I
did.
was like,
Sorry.
he beat me so bad it made me horny, actually, because of how great he is at basketball, which is another probably belief by these guys.
Well, I mean, okay, the bitch liberal journalist character, we first encounter her after like he gets the guy to win the track meet, right? And then she's like, "Oh, there's a story here. I can manipulate these guys into becoming trans icons or whatever." And then like, okay, so Jeremy Boring and this guy has just won $5,000. I did like the detail that Jeremy Boring gives the guy who won the race $500 out of the $4,500 he's keeping for himself to pay, quote, child support as the coach of a guy who just won a 100-meter dash. There's not much coaching you need to fucking do for that.
Yeah.
But so she rolls up, and then like after the guy leaves, she's like, no. To Jeremy Boring, she goes, no, you're coming home with me because I got to have sex with you because you're a winner now. This guy coached someone who just won a fucking foot race. And she's like... once again, like the assumptions you have to find this funny, like to believe that there's even the barest shred of like human behavior that's being satirized here is to be a psychopath. Like your understanding of sex and humanity is so fundamentally skewed that like, what are you even making fun of? And the answer is this bizarre concoction of like phantasms that they've erected in their own minds about like, about women's sexuality.
It also feels like guys that, didn't have a lot of sex in high school and stuff like that and blamed it on this charisma that these athletes or whatever had, when a lot of times, like, women also like the athletes because they're not fucking dickheads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Like,
not possessive little creeps.
Yeah.
A lot of the athletes I knew were also like incredibly academically accomplished, and just by virtue of like doing a physical thing with linear progression and like a teamwork had like some measure of maturity beyond like the rest of us.
Yeah, and it's not a charisma because like the thing they confuse is like, is this a charisma of this is a charisma that causes that because they win, that they win this stuff. And that means they're bestowed some kind of ancient charisma that winners get. And instead, it is like, it really is just like guys that aren't like assholes, guys that like, because these guys have clearly, Jeremy Boring has never hung out with a group of guys. I just refuse to believe it.
The Daily Wire, if you watch Daily Wire content, when they're hanging out in the dudes room, and they have an old-timey popcorn machine, and they're all smoking cigars. And half of the guys that they're hanging out with are 70 years old, like Andrew Clavin. and they're hanging out in the dudes room, like the screening room, the Daily Wire writers room. And they're just token stogies chopping it up with each other. But Brian, you're so right. It is just like, this is their adult fantasy version of what it was like for the rest of us to have friends in high school.
Yes. Absolutely.
Or even now, even as adults, like this is what guys like to do. Hang out next to a popcorn machine, smoking cigars.
I remember I watched one that was like a 6-minute video about them saying like, no, you didn't just say that Die Hard's a Christmas movie.
Oh my God. Go fuck yourself. Jesus Christ. Was this movie made in a time machine?
Possibly. It could have been written in the early 2000s, maybe, and then they just like some of it's written, and then they were like, it was probably about like another conservative issue.
It was about
the
gay
moment,
marriage,
like gay marriage. Yeah. And they're like, let's change that around a little bit and add some trans stuff.
I don't want to like get too epic about this, like the stuff that like men talk about in a group, because everyone's different, right? But for me, laughter is one of the greatest things in life. One of the best things you could do with your friends is come up with like, incredibly elaborate jokes that hinges like on your knowledge of each other, that aren't necessarily like, they're not always like mean even. That's it is based on how well you know these people.
You're crafting a kind of shared mythology.
Yeah, and there's just none of that here. It's just like they have a guidebook for what to talk about when they meet a cool man.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about the one scene in this movie where I was actually taken aback by how evil it was? It was actually like kind of surprising to me, even for this movie. And it's a scene that happens towards the end of the movie, where it's like the championship women's basketball event. And at this point, like Jeremy Boring feels guilty that he's like destroyed women's sports with this cruel charade. It's gone too far, blah, blah, blah. At some point, the star athlete, the first guy he recruits into his Lady Ballers team, who's been portraying a woman now for like, I guess, months in the movie, and who was working at the Dollhouse restaurant when Jeremy Boring first encounters him, says to his coach at this point, he basically says that like, this is no longer pretend for me, and has basically like authentically become trans in some way. And he says, and it's actually like a moment that kind of like surprised me, because I was like, oh, is this movie going to be like, oh, it's okay to be trans, but like don't play basketball against
other women? I thought too well.
Yeah, like, and he's like, he says, coach, like all this time playing basketball, like I've never felt myself. I've never felt like my parents are proud of me. Like I just didn't know who I was. But like doing this and like being a woman has made me finally feel like at home with myself and who I am. And I was just like, oh wow, like that's sort of like, that's a surprisingly like tender, incredible rendering of like someone struggling with their gender identity. And then nope, it is just shut down immediately because Jeremy Boring gives him the worst pep talk ever, where he just goes, everyone's confused, but you're not a woman. You just live in a shitty culture and had shitty parents. And no parent should love you unconditionally. He says parents should love you unconditionally, but they should be proud of you conditionally. And he just goes, you're not a woman, you're a man. And then he just like, thanks, coach. And I was just
I'm sorry, it's not all of us are confused about that. I would hasten to say that most of us are not. Like that was the biggest tell to me, was when he was like, we all think this sometimes, right? And it's like, no, like that's actually not like that. No,
but he literally says to him like, you're not a woman, you just had bad parents.
Yeah,
like,
it's everybody's got
like what are you supposed to do about it now? Like, okay, I got thanks. I'll move on now. I'll accept myself.
Will, you're also missing the cruel capper of that scene, which is the basketball guy being like, well, how do you know I'm not a woman? And then Jeremy Boring just kicks him in the nuts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, he says something about your parents have been telling you that they're proud of you when they're not really proud of you. It was like such a weird fucking scene where I was like,
yeah, it was the opposite of uplift. It was like, even if you were trying to like in the moral universe of this movie, make a credible like thesis statement at the end of the movie about why gender identity, transitioning gender is wrong, and why men are men and women are women. If you were, I thought there would be a way to like, I guess there really isn't a way to render that in a compassionate, point of view. But like, this just came across as like the most deflating and like uninspirational and like mean thing you could say to someone who told you like that they were questioning their gender identity. But in the universe of this movie, they're like, that's just what everyone needs to hear. The truth. Your parents don't love you and never did.
Yeah, you're constructing this elaborate satire to send up what you think of as like a social ill. But even through an hour and 50 minutes of this, the satire cannot reach deeper than just the response, no, you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because like I thought like the movie, like if it wanted to make the point that like, oh, like there's some scourge of like, you know, men pretending to be women in women's sports or something like that, which isn't true. But like I thought like you could make the case, like if the movie acknowledged that some people do have, do transition and do feel different than the body that they were assigned at birth or whatever. I thought the movie could make like it would be more credible, and it would do more work towards the agenda it's trying to fucking foment if it just acknowledged that and like been like, yeah, it's okay, you're still our friend and we do acknowledge your gender or whatever. But like, yeah, just don't play basketball anymore.
Yeah, we all have bad parents that say they're proud of us when they're really not. And just don't go home and think about that for the rest of the night after this comedy.
I'm sure that won't cause any more issues. No. But like, I
which is funny because that's what they see. Like, you got to think of how they see their own parents as like, my parents, maybe because their parents didn't tell them they're proud of them, that's how they succeeded or something. It's really hard to tell.
Brian,
but somebody wrote about their parents.
The way this movie deals with like bullying and being a winner too is also really telling, because they're like, oh, like it's not like I'm not fucked up today because I was bullied as a kid. It's that like, oh, the kids today aren't allowed to bully other kids. So like what was done to me is actually right and proper, and that like your role as an adult is to continue doing that, and to continue like, yeah, just being like, if you're an adult who's worried that kids aren't being bullied enough in school, you should be in prison. You should be lobotomized. Like, what is wrong with you?
It's not true either.
Yeah,
you know,
kids will be mean to each other no matter what.
Yeah, that's my daughter just, graduated high school, and kids are just as mean as they ever were, conservatives. It's not changing, and they'll always be just as mean. She got lucky and there wasn't as much bullying, but there was still, now they got Instagram pages to pick on nerds.
Yeah, that lasts forever.
Yeah.
That's fucking forever. I do want to talk about the climax of this movie, though, which was, again, like if I was writing a parody of this movie, I couldn't have come up with like the psychosexual dynamics on display in the climax of this movie, which features the Lady Ballers reach the championship round to advance to the global games or something like that. After beating every women's team by like 100 points. Their competition for the final match is that like the bitch journalist has sold out to the coach of the other team and then like sex blackmailed him into fielding another team of men pretending to be women, except his team of men pretending to be women are all black guys. And then like they see their competition, they're like, ruh-roh, oh, record scratch. They're like, oh, what? So like that's weird enough already. And like, of course they get annihilated by like the squad of black guys pretending to be women. But then there's a moment where one of their opposing players has their shorts yanked down in front of an entire audience of people. And this is where the Andrew Klavan cameo, where everyone's looking at this, a guy's dick, and he says, "Good Lord, that's the biggest dick I've ever seen on a woman." And like, they just need to make a joke about a black guy's cock and how big it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, they just need to throw that in there. And like, it's just, and then the climax of the movie is that Jeremy Boring puts in his own daughter and her friends to play against the adult black men pretending to be women. And that's the climax of the movie. Cause like,
and then
I think
weirdly,
like this is a big triumphant moment, because they're like, we're finally doing things the right way, and we're not polluting women's sports or like the purity of competition. But the way he views all women, the way they view all women's sports, is a team of 7-year-old girls competing against adult men. That's how seriously they take the thought of women's sports in a movie that's supposed to be like about protecting women's sports. And I believe there was even one of these like athletes in the movie who's made a big stink about losing to some trans woman in a swim meet. And she's in this movie, and there's a scene with a swim meet where she's like finishing her lap, and then the guy is already out of the pool, like shaking her hand, pulling her out of the pool. And I'm like, from her perspective, like if you're an athlete who's trying to like make the case that you're a serious competitor at the highest level, why are you like getting in on a joke where like you're that bad at swimming that a guy who hasn't even been in a pool could beat you by a lap? It just doesn't seem to respect the thought of like women's sports at all.
No, I absolutely knew that when they went backstage when they went to the locker room to get ready at the first game where they come out as the Lady Ballers, I fucking knew that the audience was going to be like nobody, or like 2 or 3. I thought it might be like 2 or 3 women that look like lesbians. Is really what I thought. There's also a cameo. I know this is a cameo. I just don't know who it is. But the cable news people, do you know who those are? Those people that
was Michael Knowles
Daily
and
Wire
then the girl
people
that looks like Ben Shapiro. I don't know her name.
Okay, yeah, because I'm Native American now. I'm an indigenous person, and then she gets she's
wearing like a
that
dashiki
woman
or something. Like
that woman is definitely a Daily Wire person, because it's just so poorly. It's like so not funny.
Yeah, all the women in this movie, except for like Jeremy Boring's ex-wife, they all act as though like someone came into the set and like beat Jeremy Boring nearly to death, like just like violently assaulted them, and they're like, well, we only have like this studio space for another day. Like we have to do these scenes. Like I know what we saw was fucked up, but we have to keep going. They're just they have like a stilted, like traumatized delivery that's so
It was like
very anti-humor.
Yeah, they had all just got off the set for The Crow starring Brandon Lee, and they were like, can we get you to do a few quick scenes here for Jeremy Boring and Boring Movies, a production of Boring Films?
Yeah, like the journalist character who I will charitably say it looks like if Ukraine tried to make their own Anna Kendrick.
But from the Chernobyl region of Ukraine.
Yeah. Like all the women characters, except for, I guess, Jeremy Boring's wife, but even her are so fucking baffling. Like, obviously this woman has insane psychosis about women, but like, most of the women characters with speaking lines are like outright evil.
Yeah, they're repellent. They are monsters. They are all awful and like violent too, and like violently evil.
Yeah, like okay, all the shit with the journalist like was trying to kill Jeremy Boring with the anti-materiel rifle. I don't know what that was about. The thing with like, they don't know what a hickey is.
No,
you don't like get blisters.
No, I mean, he had burns on his neck from being tied to a radiator, which it's part of like an S&M thing. Because like the scene where the bitch journalist.
That's not what S&M thing.
Yeah.
No, I'm really into S&M. I had my partner shoot me in the kneecap with his gun. You fucking idiot.
Exactly the thought here, I think. Because that's the joke, is right. He's like, can we have sex now? And which says something about him too. I don't really know what.
Begging for it.
Yeah, begging for it from a woman that's
Asking
been beating him up for weeks. Yeah.
She's like, I'm awful. I'm a liberal who I alternate between really believing in this stuff and not every other
my God.
scene.
Couldn't figure that out.
Yeah. But also she's unreservedly against no fault divorce.
Yeah,
that was a Steven Crowder
Felix,
contribution.
Yeah, Felix, like the journalist character was so funny because it was like, oh, she's a liberal, but like she actually believes all the conservative things about gender and sexuality and marriage, but she just only cynically doesn't believe it for money. And there's a scene once again looking at the camera where she goes,
"These transhumanist tech oligarchs and nihilist college professors have already convinced every self-righteous housewife with Munchausen by proxy to sacrifice their kids on the altar of false virtue. The least we could do is get rich off it."
It's so bad.
Yeah, it's
like,
but
like, what are the logistics of like? How do they think it works? Like, if like a local reporter did a news report where they were like, "Oh, this like trans woman won a race," or is the CEO of news gonna be like, "Oh my god, we're giving you $1 million." For this great story. It got so many clicks. Your article's going viral.
But just like, once again, speaking to like the Jeremy Boring's understanding of sexuality, the one scene in this movie that was, I think, wholly unintentionally funny, but the one gag that like got me the closest to like actually laughing was after the bitch journalist takes him home to have sex with him because he's a winner now that he coached a guy to win a 100-meter race. She takes him home and like it cuts to them and like they're both in bed after having sex, presumably. And she is dressed like Batman. She has a full Batman leather costume on. And she's like, like snuggling up to go to bed. He is fully clothed and tied to the bed. But the one detail I thought like could have been funny if it was intentional is that he's still wearing his coach's polo tee and like stopwatch around his neck in bed after having sex. But like I think that was entirely incidental.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that was an intentional joke.
Yeah, I will give them that one if it's
even if it's not intended.
There aren't intentional. None of the intentional jokes are funny. Not a single fucking one of the intentional jokes in here are funny. There are unintentionally like weird, dark things about the people that made this movie that you're like in your head the whole time.
For instance,
fuck, man.
For instance, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, the how much guy.
Yep.
Who makes probably a half dozen appearances with the same joke, where this like very weird looking cowboy man, originally he discovers Jeremy Boring and the athlete dressed as women in an alley and solicits them for sex by saying, how much? And then they're like, ooh, yikes, not for me. Ooh, time to go away. And then he keeps showing up throughout this movie whenever it is like implied that a man might be having sex with another man or being naked, to just show up at a high school basketball game and be like, how much?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't fully psychoanalyze that joke or what it speaks to, or like just the fear and desire to be penetrated by another man. I don't know. But like, it certainly wasn't funny.
But like, okay, in the first how much scene, Alex, the guy who eventually wins the race, he just like, he abandons Jeremy Boring. He just fucking dashes out of there. He's gone. You don't see him. Jeremy Boring, he's shown to like, he's trying to run in like high heels and shit, and he's not making it. Like the how much guy is rapidly gaining on him. But then the scene just like cuts to the day of the race, and it's like, well, wait, did that guy fuck him?
Did he get his money's worth?
That's what I meant when I meant director's trademark. Director and all his friends get raped. Like that. It's like presumably that happened, but he's just like, he's such a winner that he's like, no, I still am doing the race tomorrow.
I did just find the Lady Ballers review on Worth It or Woke. And it is worth it, everybody.
Please.
And it's 100% not woke.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I was looking for the how much guy, trying to find out if it's like a cameo or something like that, because I've never fucking seen that guy. But yeah, they gave it a good review on Worth It or Woke. It got you're looking at 76% overall score. Story and plot was 70%. Visuals and cinematography 75. Performance 68.
That's generous. Generous.
Direction 70%, and then non-wokeness 100%.
What a criteria! What a fucking criteria for assessing something's artistic value.
I've never seen that site, but now I'm going to be on it all the time.
Acting, directing, writing, all thoroughly mediocre. Wokeness? Oh boy, is this movie not woke? It's a masterpiece.
I would love to.
It had all the
review.
stupid politics I believe in.
I would love to read a review of the movie Atonement on that website.
Sex is bad in that movie too.
Yeah, I think they might like it. I don't know. I love that movie. Maybe they will too.
Insane site.
The first like Daily Wire movie we watched, it was a school shooter movie that like
they had nothing to do with the production. They just distributed it, so it's like a watchable, okay movie.
Right. It was like a very like 6 out of 10 movie. Like nothing really bad about it, and I guess it gave me like an unrealistic picture of how horrible it would be to watch these movies. This was like, God, this made me yearn for The Reliant.
Oh my God, yes.
Do they have like, so it's like everything else on here there's no, what's it called? There's no like sitcoms or anything on here, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, because
it all depends on the success of Lady Ballers. Will you get a Lady Ballers sitcom?
Oh my God.
The first contact I had with Lady Ballers, I didn't know it was coming out. I was on Rotten Tomatoes looking for some review or something like that, and it had like a 75% on there, and I was like, holy shit, what is this movie? And I clicked it and found out it was like a Daily Wire thing, and now it's gone down to 50% and only 7 people have reviewed it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I was just like, what is this? And it's Sorority Boys. It's kind of the same movie as Sorority Boys from the 2000s.
Yeah. Well, what if white chicks, like, what if no one in that movie had any charisma?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing funny.
I feel like we're wrapping up. I just wanted to say one thing about, like, I guess kind of the filmmaking and also just the violence as it's portrayed in both this, and also I was thinking about Range 15. There's something subtle in these conservative comedies in the way that they like stage violent gags, where it's just like a little extra viciousness in the reality of like people getting hit. Like I'm thinking of them shoving towels on the Felix character at the beginning, some people wrestling. And it honestly made me think a lot about the movie Bottoms from this summer, which I know people are hot and cold on. I quite liked, but like the difference in these two things, you know, Bottoms has a scene where a female character has the shit beaten out of her by a male athlete that in the context of that movie is fucking hilarious. But the context of the movie is that the idea of violence, the idea of resorting to fighting is funny. In these conservative movies, it isn't the concept of violence isn't funny. It is the actual violence itself is good. And we should be doing it. And it is funny to exert violence on other people.
Exactly.
It is funny to dominate and degrade others. Not like the idea of degradation it has, you know, some kind of satirical moment to it. And that's where the satire fails because it's not satire. They're just like, no, it's actually good.
Yeah, I think Range 15 is the most useful movie to compare this one to, but I would almost I unreservedly would say Range 15 movie was better because at least it's like a conservative Sallow kind
it's of. It's truer in a way.
Yeah. It's a conservative Sallow unintentionally because it is like their intent is like I guess like they saw like epic movie and we're like let's do that.
Yeah.
But like with famous troops. But it's so just like over the top, like unfunny and thoroughly repulsive that it does tell like a fundamental truth. And it's the artistic value. There is some of it just by the fact that these guys have killed people and now they're making like ringtone jokes while also like doing necrophilia. It holds some type of like abstract value. I would put it in like the Voyager capsule. I would be like, this is unfortunate. Like this explains a lot of humanity. Unfortunately, Lady Ballers, I think I would like exile like even the lighting crew to the countryside for 5 generations.
Yeah, the sound mixer needs to go to Elba.
Yeah, it's like anyone who worked on this, internal management, you can never work on the arts again. I don't care. Like I know that like most of the people who worked on this movie, you're like just trying to get experience. You're doing the thing where you're getting really good at like rolling up cables. I know, but I hated watching this. You're getting banished.
As I said before, this is a movie that is not just unfunny, but like when this movie was over, I began to seriously question whether I would ever laugh again or whether I would be able of recognizing like humor when I encountered it because of like how thoroughly it had defiled the very concept of something being funny. I guess my overall review of this movie would be if you are gay or trans, then by all means watch this movie because rest assured you are completely let off the hook. Not a single blow is landed, nor do they even really acknowledge your existence. However, if you are a cisgendered woman or anyone who cares about women's sports, then this movie will be the most offensive thing you've ever seen. Like this violently
is the takedown of that.
Yeah.
We made a takedown of women's sports.
No, of women, period.
Yes.
That's what this movie is.
Yeah, that's true. I did pick up on the like, you know, what they were saying about women athletes. Like I definitely like picked up on that when I watched it. But then now that you add it all together, there's this weird like guys that hate women, guys that have never hung out with guys, because the violent stuff in this is exactly the thing too. It's like when you're a teenager, not in your 30s or in your 20s, but when you're a teenager, you and your friends beat the crap out of each other for like fun. At least that's what we did. We would, sneak up behind a guy and kick him in the back of the knees so he falls. But you don't do that in your fucking 30s, and you don't do it.
There are so many scenes of adult men wrestling with each other and being like, "Shut up, you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot," and then just fighting.
That's not how 30-year-old men hang out with each other.
So like am I supposed to believe that like Jeremy Boring is like regularly like nut tapping Steven Crowder?
Yeah.
Like maybe, I don't know.
But a little grab ass. Yeah, like this is a movie whose like the political point of view is that women's sports need to be protected from a thing that isn't happening anywhere. But women's sports, the thing that we need to protect, are entirely worthless and stupid, and women shouldn't play sports.
Right, and one of the reasons that women shouldn't play sports is because their divine role is to civilize men who are
the line where Jeremy Boring says to his daughter, "Yeah, sure, women aren't." He says, "Sure, women aren't as good at basketball or driving or rock and roll."
That's just not true.
They're better at basketball.
Okay, yeah, basketball.
And swimming.
Okay.
MMA.
That goes without saying.
And running. And javelin. Powerlifting. Shot put. Hockey. Karate. Football. Pole vault. Driving. Parking. Most of the STEM fields. Rock and roll. Opening pickle jars.
Okay.
He says men are better at rock and roll at one point, which is like, okay.
So he puts like, I presumably he puts like Creed over like Sleater Kinney. I presume.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, 1,000%. So he tells his daughter, and again, what is supposed to be the movie, like communicating a message, a wholesome message of truth that's just like, this is important. And this is a guy telling his daughter, he's supposed to be a good father, is telling his daughter, I know women aren't as good at men at anything that's cool or interesting, but like, don't worry, you can still nurture a child and civilize men, just like your mom tried to civilize me. And it's just like, why wouldn't someone transition gender if this is the fucking expectation? If you're born a woman, is that like, guess what? You'll never be good at anything cool or fun. So just become a mom. That's kind of cool, right?
I also like the implication that Jeremy Boring is just like, he's like fucking Rambo in First Blood. He is so primal and masculine.
Yeah. So many rough edges that need to be sanded down.
Yeah. Jeremy Boring would probably be like just ripping people's throats out if he didn't have a good woman holding him back.
Your mom's not even really good at civilizing men. She wasn't able to pull it off with me. You know? I don't honestly know what she's good at.
I mean, I think it's not a coincidence that you very, very rarely see the trans panic in the Daily Wire set directed towards trans men in anything, because I think the real panic is not really gender fluidity in any way, but is the idea of becoming a woman.
Yes,
it is
the idea of being, it's not just the threat or fear of being feminized in some way, which is of course wrung for lots of hilarious comedy material. Imagining being raped in this movie, but like, it's the idea that women could endeavor to achieve something that is in any way better than the shitty output that you've created in your life. Because like, that's why the women's sports thing is such like it's why this disturbs them so much. Not the idea that a man could like, of course, beat any woman at a sport. It's the idea that like, yes, at the highest level of competition, the best male athlete will always outperform at the same sport or beat in some stupid way the most elite female athlete. But like,
and in the explicit cosmology of this movie, the black male athlete will always outperform the white male athlete.
And that as well. But also, it's just like for any, not even elite woman athlete, for like anyone who's trained, they are better, faster, stronger than 99% of every man on the planet at that whether it's that physical, that sport, or like just simply lifting or running fast, lifting something heavy or running fast. They are better than you. They are better than Ben Shapiro. And I would say the average woman who's even not an athlete is probably stronger and faster than Ben fucking Shapiro is. And it's that cursed knowledge to know that like you are a man. So you have no excuse for how fucking weak and shitty everything you do is. How generally bad and fucking coddled your life has been. So the idea that any woman anywhere could produce anything of value is so threatening and horrifying to these men that like it has to be like an outlandish comedy concept.
When he gives that whole speech to his daughter and with MMA, he's like, "Oh God, no." Again, Ronda Rousey and Claudia Gadelha, who's like, Ronda Rousey isn't like she's not like huge. She's like 5'6". She's like strong, but she's, larger like person than Claudia Gadelha. Claudia Gadelha fought at a much lower weight class. I've seen countless videos of both of them, like just destroying very well trained men. Like it's just like professional like really does mean something, especially at the highest level. Like just going by this movie, a guy like Steven Crowder supposedly could like beat the shit out of Amanda Nunes. And it's like, no, he would that's the end of Steven Crowder. He'd fucking die. Really any Brazilian woman, probably.
God, I would love one of these guys to fight a professional woman. I will also say, Will, you mentioned it, but they say that all men can beat all women at athletic competition. Yes, but the rock and roll thing is even worse because it's like women can't even make music as good as men.
There's no physical, there's no innate disadvantage in producing music.
Nope.
Like the only thing they can do is like be married to fucking Jeremy Boring and be like, you should like stop caring about winning as much, but you should win.
Yeah.
And he's like, thank you, I fixed my life. Like it's such a fucking grim. I'd say it's like grimmer than Handmaid's Tale. At least they had uniforms.
Oh God, yeah.
Like the idea that like no matter what you do in your life, no matter what like athletic or academic achievement, no matter what you're good at, no matter how grand an artistic vision you have, your destined purpose is to like, be married to fucking James
to Mr.
O'Keefe.
Boring.
Yeah. And
to produce boring heirs for the boring head of the household.
Yeah, to make him like lemon bars and to tell him to like tone it down sometimes, I guess. It is like I would say one of the most anti-women things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like it's like women, they are supposed to exist just barely as an auxiliary unit to men. And not even like impressive men. Just like any fucking loser.
Women are basically so that they can tell you to mow the grass. Because women can't mow the grass.
That being said, I would do anything for these Daily Wire dweebs to put their money where their mouth is. And I would sponsor a televised sporting event in which like the Daily Wire fields a starting five of their all-stars. I'm talking Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Andrew Clavin, the even weirder, more annoying one, the gay one. I don't know. All five of them.
Is there a black guy in the Daily
probably,
Wire?
There isn't a black guy who like is fully Daily Wire team, but he's been in some of their productions. Zuby.
Okay.
Do you guys know Zuby?
Get Zuby on the team. I'm saying the Daily Wire.
Zuby, the conservative rapper.
I want to see. Yeah, I want to see their starting five. I want to see the Daily Wire All Stars play a game of pickup basketball against just one, like either Candace Parker or Breonna Stewart. Just one good women's basketball player. And I would like to see them run them off the fucking court. Not being able to pass the ball.
I also, again, I don't know how I'll do it. I will secure a $50 million purse for Steven Crowder to fight like Amanda Nunes, Angie Hill, anyone who's ever been in the top 15 in a UFC's women's division.
Dude, combat sports is a place where people genuinely like watching women compete. Like in MMA and like any of them, like the same amount of people are basically watching the women as they are men. So that one doesn't even like.
Yeah, like it used to be that like women's MMA had a similar problem to like the WNBA. But like the problem was like with a lot of women's sports, it's a vicious cycle where like there isn't enough like money in it, and there just isn't like the same payoff for this incredibly high risk career that like a man would have. So less people compete. But when Ronda Rousey started competing, and even before that, like Gina Carano and Cyborg, that like when people saw that like women do possess knockout power, it really opened it up. And like, I watched women's MMA for a really long time. I didn't even expect for like, a ton of UFC fans to watch like women's 120 pound, like I didn't expect people to watch like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who is like amazing, but they did. because like they like had amazing fights.
Yeah, they main event shows. Like
Yeah.
they can main event with women. That was really frustrating to me.
Ronda
because that's just-
Rousey was one of their biggest pay-per-view draws ever.
Yeah, and they saying women can't do MMA, and also women's basketball is getting a lot more popular too. Has been over the years. Like women's sports, this is such an antiquated thing, and like you said, it's a vicious cycle anyway. Because like it's kind of like how people thought Indian food was like this inherently like evil thing that gives you diarrhea every time you eat it. Because on Friends, they would be like, "Oh, excuse me, I had Indian food." It takes time to get past that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like really, it's women's MMA was there was this like promotion that was only for women called Invicta after the collapse of Elite XC. Elite XC was the promotion that was built around Kimbo Slice, and of course, like went bankrupt the moment that Kimbo like fought an actual like guy who wasn't taking a dive. But Elite XC, to their credit, they did have like women's fights. They famously, like Gina Carano, made her name there. Gina Carano, now a conservative
Daily
movie
Wire
star.
contributor.
Yeah, but all it took was like the fact that for Ronda Rousey, that just like at least being an American who gets an Olympic medal in judo, there's no like lucrative tract after that. Unfortunately, it's not like other countries where like they'll at least like give you a stipend for the rest of your life because you did something amazing. She was like, okay, fuck it. Like I trained with like Jean LaBelle. I'll see how far this could go. And she was like, you know, obviously there were major holes in her game, and she, more than anything, had like one of the worst coaches at a high level ever in Edmund Tarverdyan.
Was it Jeremy Boring?
He'd be a good coach. Jeremy Boring at the beginning.
Edmund Tarverdyan was sort of the Jeremy Boring of MMA because he would, like Ronda, she got obsessed with like, you know, her thing was judo. She would always like throw a woman and like just rip her arm off. But she got obsessed with striking, and she was fucking terrible at it. And fucking Edmund would just encourage her to do it, and she would be out there just getting destroyed. And he'd be yelling, head movement, head movement, head movement, head movement for 5 minutes straight while she's getting knocked out. And it was an unfortunate end to like a career that started great. But just by the virtue of there being like a world-class athlete competing, it completely opened it up.
All right, should we wrap it up there? I got to give my cat a pill. I just realized.
Yes.
Did you want to go out with the conservative Christmas song?
Yeah, let's do a quick programming note real quick. As Will alluded to at the beginning of this, now that the seal is broken of sometimes taking pauses on the show, we are going to take the week of Christmas to New Year's off this year. We are down to 2 hosts.
We've earned
plus
it.
Myself. I have some family health stuff that isn't an emergency, but I have to attend to over the holiday. The scheduling is a nightmare. So we're going to take a dark week from Christmas to New Year's, but we will be back, I believe, on January 1st with more episodes to you. I will also be putting up 2 more Hell of Presidents, the first 2 bonus episodes next week. I might upload all the old Christmas specials to Patreon just so they're all there in one collection. You can go re-listen to those. There will be some content on the site. Plus, we basically gave you a double episode with this one. So Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays for whatever you celebrate. Have a good week off, and we will be back with you in 2024. You guys want to listen to some conservative Christmas music to go out?
Let's do it.
I always do.
All right. This is Please 4 More Years of Trump by Trump Latinos and MAGA Mommy.
Again, they can't be funny. They just have to say the word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly.
All right, here we go.
Please 4 more years, please 4 more years. Please 4 more years, please 4 more years. Please 4 more years, please 4 more years. Please 4
Oh my God.
Please 4 more years, please 4 more years. Please 4 more years, please 4 more years.
We got to get to some of the verses.
Yeah. Please 4 more years.
I know we all miss Trump. Even Biden does too. He probably think it's Easter. He worked for China. That's true. Trump checking his list. He's checking it twice. Illegal illegal immigrants get deported by eye. You know it's brick by brick. We gotta
They're gonna do it someday. Finish that
wall.
wall.
Obama somewhere, jingling on Big Mike's bar. You know I miss mean tweets.
I miss mean tweets.
Well, I can give you some of those, motherfucker.
That's a Christmas story that I could tell my kids about. Give me 4 more years, I'll give you liberal tears. Cause the next 4 years, you dead me space in your fears.
All right, we got to hear the ladies' verse, and then we'll get out on this.
Please 4 more years, please 4 more years.
God, this auto-tune is getting a workout.
I really prefer Target as targeting kids. That's my favorite conservative song.
Please 4 more years, please 4 more years.
Donald Trump.
From Santa, I'm going Hannah Montana. You know this Georgia peach got a little pinch of Atlanta. I know you see this booty bouncing like a basketball, but I'm conservative living. I just can't get
This is like Marsha Blackburn rapping. This sucks.
So I had to leave Cali. We love our country.
All right, maybe women can't do arts.
Yeah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag. Trump is our real president.
Trump is our real president.
What it takes to be a woman. Let your man make the money.
Trans women don't understand what it takes to be a woman.
Trans men don't understand.
Men don't understand what it is to be a woman because.
But isn't that like saying like, yes, trans men are men?
Yes.
I guess.
And then it's just more hook. Anyway, I just thought that was a nice compliment to conservative comedy.
I know that's probably like not what they mean, but I like the idea that she's just like very pro only trans men.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she just put that in the verse for no reason.
Oh,
all right.
What a joy. Merry Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Dashing through the